The mailbox is not just a box, it's the final straw. That's what I told the police officer the third time I reported the same incident. My mailbox being destroyed, again. But this wasn't just any oops, I lost control of the car kind of damage. This was deliberate, repeated, targeted. And the person responsible? Karen. No, not a Karen. The Karen. The same Karen who ran the HOA like a petty dictatorship. The same Karen who fined me for having the wrong shade of blue on my recycling bin. The same Karen who installed a camera facing my driveway for security, but claimed it didn't work when my tires got mysteriously slashed last winter. Yeah, that Karen. Let me tell you how it all started, and how I turned a nightmare into poetic justice with a little engineering, a lot of patience, and one mailbox she definitely didn't see coming. I'd just moved into this peaceful, little suburban cul-de-sac. I bought a cozy single-story home with a big lawn, a white fence, and a brand-new black mailbox on a decorative cedar post. I was excited. It was the first house I bought on my own. But on the very first morning, I stepped outside to find my beautiful new mailbox snapped in half. At first, I thought maybe it was a delivery truck accident or a late-night driver who misjudged the turn. Accidents happen, right? But then I saw the tire tracks. They curved directly into my yard. Straight shot. No signs of braking. Just pure, calculated destruction. When I asked around, my neighbor Dave shook his head and muttered, "Yup, sounds like Karen again." Karen, it turns out, had a habit. She didn't like the look of my tall, city-style mailbox. Apparently, she preferred the short, country-style ones that looked like little barns. And because she was the self-appointed ruler of our HOA, she decided my mailbox had to go. But instead of writing me up, she ran it down. I tried the polite route. I attended the next HOA meeting, introduced myself, and brought up the issue without naming names. Karen smiled that tight-lipped, condescending smile and said, "Well, perhaps the mailbox was installed too close to the curb. You know, regulations and all." Except I had the HOA manual. And guess what? I'd followed every rule to the letter. When I mentioned that, she waved her hand and said, "Some of those guidelines are flexible. I suggest a shorter model next time, just to, prevent further accidents." That's when it hit me. She wasn't going to stop. She enjoyed the power, the control. This was less about a mailbox and more about making a statement. She wanted me, the new guy, to fall in line. Spoiler alert, I didn't. A week later, I replaced the mailbox. This time, I reinforced the post with concrete. I even added reflectors so it was clearly visible at night. Didn't matter. The second hit happened 2 nights later. Same tire tracks. Same smashed mailbox. And this time, I had a camera. Not Karen's fake security camera across the street. Mine. I'd installed a motion-activated trail cam facing the mailbox just in case. Guess who it caught? Karen's SUV. License plate. Clear as daylight. She even leaned out the window and smirked after doing it. I reported it to the HOA. Guess who processed the complaint? Karen. And guess what she said? Looks like an accident to me. By the third time, I stopped playing nice. That third strike happened after I got home from work on a Friday. I didn't even get out of the car before I saw the wreckage. The post was split like firewood, the box crushed flat. I didn't even bother calling the HOA. Instead, I called my cousin Drew. He's a mechanical engineer. Bit of a genius. Bit of a maniac. When I explained the situation, he said, "Let's build a mailbox she won't walk away from." And that was the beginning of Project Iron Post. Over the next few weekends, we got to work. The post wasn't with his time, it was solid steel, anchored 3 feet deep in a concrete base. The mailbox? Still standard size on the outside. Inside, it was reinforced with welded steel plating. We even used shock-absorbing springs to keep it from shaking on impact so it would stand its ground. It looked totally normal, unassuming, harmless. But this thing could probably stop a runaway truck. It was built like a baller disguised as a mailbox. I painted it matte black and added the little red flag, just like before. No upgrades, no aggressive features. Just extremely sturdy. It was technically compliant with all HOA regulations. And then we waited. It happened faster than I expected. 3 nights later, I heard the roar of an engine outside. I peeked through the curtains and saw her SUV lining up with the curb. She was doing it again. Except this time, the mailbox didn't move. Her SUV did. The sound was sickening, a crunch of plastic, bending metal, and an unmistakable pop as the airbag deployed. Her car bounced off the mailbox like it had hit a wall. The mailbox stood completely still. Karen stumbled out of the vehicle, dazed and yelling, her front bumper hanging off, coolant pouring onto the street. She looked at my mailbox like it had betrayed her personally. I walked out of my bathrobe with a cup of coffee. I didn't say a word, just stood there, sipping. She screamed, "You booby-trapped it." I calmly pointed to the HOA manual and said, "Actually, I just installed it to spec. You must have missed it again." Police showed up. I handed over the footage, dash cam, trail cam, timestamps, the whole thing. I showed them the past incidents, the complaints, the dismissals, the photos. Karen tried to flip the narrative, of course, said I was harassing her, targeting her with dangerous constructions, blah, blah, blah. The cops weren't buying it. Not with the evidence in hand. The HOA tried to get involved, but public sentiment wasn't on her side anymore. Turns out, I wasn't the only one she'd been harassing. Neighbors came forward with their own stories. One woman got fined for planting non-regulation tulips. Another got threatened over the color of her front door. People were fed up. At the next HOA election, Karen was voted out by a landslide. Her SUV, by the way, was totaled. Insurance wouldn't cover it because they ruled it intentional damage. She had to pay out of pocket. The mailbox? Still standing. Word spread fast. The mailbox that fought back became a bit of a legend in the neighborhood. Kids would stop on their bikes just to tap it and feel how solid it was. I even caught a couple of dads admiring the welds. One weekend, like it was a sports car, I could have taken it down. Could have gone back to a normal one now that Karen was gone. But I didn't, because that mailbox wasn't just metal and bolts. It was a symbol, a monument, a quiet reminder that bullies don't get to win just because they hide behind fake authority. Sometimes the best way to stand up is to plant your feet, reinforce your post, and let the consequences do the talking. I thought it was over after the crash. Karen was publicly humiliated, voted out, and her SUV towed away like a broken symbol of her ego. But I underestimated one thing. Karen wasn't done. She might have lost her title as HOA president, but she still had friends in the board. Friends who owed her favors. And suddenly, weird letters started showing up in my mailbox. Violation notices. First, it was the height of my grass. Then, my non-regulation solar lights. Then, a warning for having an improperly engineered structure. Yes, they were targeting the mailbox again. But here's the kicker. The HOA was trying to enforce something called the Revenge Clause, a petty, little-known bylaw that let them fine any resident who intentionally creates community tension. That's right. They were trying to fine me for Karen crashing into my property. They even showed up one morning with a clipboard and a measuring wheel, trying to inspect my yard. I refused entry. That afternoon, I got hit with a $1,200 fine. It was getting serious. I needed to find out what else they were hiding, and who was really pulling the strings now that Karen was technically out. So, I did something Karen never expected. I ran for the board. Running for the HOA board is like applying to be the captain of a sinking ship. No one trusts you, everyone's watching, and there's a very good chance someone will key your car during the campaign. But I didn't care. I wasn't trying to join them. I was trying to expose them. At the first open forum, I asked if the HOA was using dues to fund private retaliation. You'd think I dropped a bomb. Karen's closest friend, a smug guy named Harold, turned pale. Another board member immediately ended the meeting for safety reasons. I was on to something. Neighbors started slipping anonymous notes in my mailbox. No destruction this time, thankfully. Notes like, "They're hiding something in the greenbelt behind Lot 14. Karen's husband used HOA funds for private landscaping. Look into the noise complaint files. You'll find the truth." It was like opening a door to a secret room. they'd built this fake little empire of rules and fines and control, and I was about to kick that door wide open. But the deeper I went, the more dangerous it got. The greenbelt behind Lot 14 was supposed to be common HOA property. A slice of nature. Trees, shrubs, nothing special. But when I went down there one night with a flashlight and a friend from a neighborhood ex-military guy named Marcus, we found something strange, a locked chain-link gate hidden behind overgrowth. The padlock was rusted, but Marcus popped it open like a soda can. Behind it, a concrete slab and 3 large containers, like shipping crates in the middle of the woods. No labels, just hazard stickers and something way too industrial-looking for a suburban HOA. We didn't open them that night, not yet, but I recorded everything. Photos, videos, GPS coordinates. The next morning, my trail cam, the one that caught Karen, was ripped off the tree and smashed to pieces. And that afternoon, I got a notice from the HOA. Unauthorized access to HOA environmental zones is a finable offense. You are hereby charged $5,000 and placed under community surveillance. Surveillance. They weren't just watching. They were covering something up. And I'd officially become public enemy number 1. It turns out Karen never really left. She might have lost her HOA seat, but she didn't lose her leverage. Word on the street was she still controlled the HOA bank account. Apparently, she'd filed a backdated change to make herself treasurer a week before the election, and no one noticed. It was legal, but dirty, and with that power, she was slowly pulling strings from the shadows again. A neighbor I trusted, sweet old Mr. Phelps, told me Karen was holding secret meetings in her backyard at night. No lights, no minutes, just cars coming and going around 10 p.m. I staked it out from across the street. Sure enough, a half dozen HOA members were there, including Harold. Papers changed hands. One guy left carrying a box that looked suspiciously like a file archive. They were circling the wagons. Karen had gone full puppet master, and the whole community was her stage again. That's when I decided, if they were going to play dirty, I'd fight smarter. It was time to open the crates. I gathered a small crew. Marcus, Dave, the neighbor who warned me about Karen, and Jen, a software engineer with drone cameras and an attitude. We went at midnight, gloves on, radios tuned, no lights. Just stealth and curiosity. Crate number 1, gardening supplies. Hundreds of pounds of it. Not weird until you saw the receipts, all billed to the HOA budget, but delivered to Karen's private landscaping company. Crate number 2, HOA files. Confidential violation reports. Many had fake names. Some are blank, but signed. There was a whole section titled Noise Complaints Strategic Uses. It wasn't just petty, it was tactical. Crate number 3. This one was locked tighter than the others. Marcus popped the hatch with a crowbar. Inside, documents, hard drives, and a folder marked Legal Protections, Emergency Use Only. I didn't know what it all meant yet, but what I did know, Karen wasn't just corrupt. She was scared. Scared enough to hide the truth, and scared enough to start fighting back. And I had just pushed the war into a new level. The folder from crate number 3 looked old, water-stained, and bound with a faded red ribbon. Like someone wanted it to stay untouched, yet knew it might one day be needed. Inside were 4 documents. A signed non-disclosure agreement with Karen's name typed under authority figure, a map of a neighborhood with certain houses marked in red, including mine a legal waiver for emergency surveillance authorization tied to HOA protocols, and a handwritten note. Use only if he pushes too far. They meant me. The note was dated 2 days before Karen crashed into my mailbox. That's when it hit me. Karen's obsession wasn't just about a mailbox. This was premeditated. I wasn't the first person she'd targeted, but I might be the first to fight back this hard. I had proof they'd been monitoring me, planning retaliation, and marking neighbors for intimidation. But here's the chilling part. I cross-checked the red houses on the map. 2 of those neighbors had moved out suddenly within the past 6 months. No warning. No garage sales. Just gone. This wasn't HOA business anymore. It was something deeper. The day after our discovery, a neighbor I'd never really spoken to, Miss Lana, older woman, lived alone, always wore big sunglasses, waved me over while I was checking Mailbox. She didn't smile, just said, "They've gone too far this time. They did the same thing to my husband. He just didn't have the guts to fight." I asked what happened. She hesitated, then invited me inside. In her living room, she pulled out a dusty binder. Inside were photos, letters, and most chilling audio tapes. HOA meetings, threats, late-night knocks on their door. Her husband had tried to petition the board years ago. Days later, he got fined into bankruptcy. He died of a heart attack 6 months after they lost their home. "They've always had ways of getting what they want," she whispered. "But you're making them nervous. That's why they're getting sloppy." Before I left, she handed me a key. "Opens a locker at the old train station downtown," she said. "He kept the worst stuff there, in case someone brave enough ever came along." I didn't know what was in that locker, but I had a feeling it would blow the lid off everything. The station was half abandoned. No trains ran through it anymore, just pigeons, dust, and the hum of flickering overhead lights. Locker 143. I opened it with Lana's key, heart thudding like I was disarming a bomb. Inside, a sealed briefcase, a stack of old manila folders, and, surprisingly, a camcorder. The tapes were labeled by year. The oldest said, 2007, the deal. That night, back home, I powered up the camcorder. The footage was grainy but clear. It showed Karen, younger, same arrogant posture, shaking hands with a man in a suit. They stood in front of a blueprint labeled Subdivision Phase 3 Expansion Plan. The man said, "Once you're president, you keep the votes clean. I'll make sure the land under the new homes is transferred cleanly. We keep the water rights." Karen nodded. "No one will question me. These people are sheep." It wasn't just corruption. It was land fraud, water rights theft, and this had been going on for nearly 20 years. They weren't just running an HOA. They were running a racket, and I'd just stumbled on the archive. Armed with the tapes and documents, I went public, or tried to. I called a neighborhood emergency meeting using my temporary position on the board. I invited every homeowner. Promised transparency. The night of the meeting, half the community showed up. I began showing clips, explaining the evidence, reading off expense reports showing HOA money funneling into Karen's personal accounts. But then Harold, Karen's lapdog, interrupted. He stood up and announced the meeting was illegally organized and a danger to community unity. Then, like clockwork, for private security, guards stepped into the room. Yes, the HOA had hired private security to shut me down. I asked them if they had a warrant or authority. They didn't answer, just said, "You've been officially barred from hosting any HOA-related events." It was a setup. I walked out to find my tires slashed. Later that night, my HOA board access was revoked. I was booted from the internal portal. The interim board had voted me out. They were scrubbing me from the inside, but they didn't know I'd already made a dozen copies of everything, and that I'd just found an ally in a very unexpected place. Jen, the tech-savvy neighbor with drones, offered a bold solution. "If they're going to shut you down officially, we go unofficial." She launched an anonymous YouTube channel, disguised our voices with filters, and began releasing the Karen files, edited versions of the tapes, documents, and audio recordings from Lana and the locker. Within days, the channel had over 100,000 views. Titles like HOA President Caught in Decades-Long Land Fraud. They tried to bankrupt me. Here's what I found in a locker, the secret HOA crime ring hiding in your subdivision. People were furious. Not just in our neighborhood, across the country, Karen's name started trending. The board went into hiding, but the pressure was growing. Local news started sniffing around. A legal firm emailed us offering pro bono representation for a class action suit. But then things got weird. My security cameras went offline. My dog wouldn't stop barking at night. And a black SUV started parking across the street with no plates. Karen wasn't going down quietly. She was preparing for the next move, and if I wasn't ready, she'd make sure I regretted ever planting that indestructible mailbox. Just as the YouTube channel was blowing up, I noticed something strange. One of the folders from Lana's binder, the one labeled Witness Statements, had vanished from my locked garage. I was sure it had been there. No signs of forced entry. No broken locks. Except my garage keypad code had been changed. Not by me. I immediately checked my home network logs. My router showed an unfamiliar device connected at 2:17 a.m. A MacBook with no registered ID. Someone had hacked into my system, opened my smart lock, walked in, and taken only that one folder. The one that apparently held the names of former HOA employees who disappeared over the years. Not quit, disappeared. Someone was cleaning up loose ends. And I was officially on their radar. So I installed silent motion cams around my property, no more relying on cloud systems they could disable. Everything was backed up offline. And then, 2 nights later, I caught someone on camera. Not Karen, not Harold, but the same suit-wearing man from the 2007 tape, older now, gray hair, same briefcase. He was watching my house, standing under a street lamp, not moving, just staring. I didn't confront him that night, didn't want to tip him off I'd seen him. Instead, I traced the image from the camera through facial recognition tools. It took 2 days, but Jen found a match. Martin Vexley, real estate developer, multiple LLCs, no social media, no interviews, just a name buried in land records from 20 years ago. Turns out, he wasn't just a developer. He was the original architect behind the HOA's formation documents. The same guy who helped design the HOA system to funnel money and power to a small group. Karen was just his puppet. Vexley had served as a consultant for over 40 HOA groups across the state. But here's the kicker. He'd been sued in 2 other counties for racketeering, and both cases were mysteriously dismissed. No settlements, no trials, just vanished. Now he was standing outside my house at 3 a.m., which meant this wasn't just about one neighborhood anymore. It was about the whole system. While digging deeper into Vexley, I discovered something worse. A digital file hidden on one of the drives Jen recovered from the locker tapes. It was titled, Renewal Candidates 2025. Sounded harmless. But the file contained a list of names homeowners in our neighborhood next to strange tags. Non-compliant, asset risk, purge phase 2, my name? At the very top. Along with Alana, Jen, 2 other neighbors I didn't even know were involved. This wasn't just spying. This was a targeting matrix. We weren't just being watched. We were being scheduled for removal, fines, legal harassment, forced foreclosures. Some homes already had Phase 1 listed beside them, and the dates aligned perfectly with the mysterious move-outs we'd seen. This was a coordinated purge of anyone who resisted. Karen didn't act alone. She was executing a blueprint, and the next phase? It was about to begin. One afternoon, just as I was reviewing the list with Jen, a white van pulled up outside. Not the usual black SUV. This was marked with a logo, Vexel Community Compliance Division. Sounded fake. Too clean. Out stepped a man in a cheap blazer, holding a clipboard. He didn't introduce himself, just walked straight up and said, "Sir, you've been flagged for multiple violations. Under HOA Charter 3.1 subsection D, your property qualifies for emergency inspection." I asked for ID. He flashed a badge. It was laminated. Jen, recording the whole thing, muttered, "That's not even a real seal." I refused entry. He smirked, handed me a paper-marked final notice, and said, "You've got 72 hours. After that, we escalate." As he walked off, he whispered, just low enough for only me to hear, "You should have left the mailbox broken." That was it. A threat wrapped in red tape. They were done playing nice. The next morning, I knocked on Lana's door to warn her. No answer. That was unusual. She always answered. I called. No response. Walked around her house. No signs of movement. But then I noticed her back window was slightly open. Curtains fluttering. Inside, the place was quiet. Too quiet. Her binder of evidence? Still on the table. Her dog? Still in the backyard, food bowl empty. But no Lana. No note. No phone. I called the police. They filed it as a missing person report, but they didn't seem too interested. No sign of forced entry, no distress. Just gone. But we both knew what this was. She was on the list. She had warned me. And now she was gone. Suddenly, the warning on the mailbox wasn't funny anymore. This wasn't about Karen. It wasn't even about the HOA. This was about power, and I was the last thread they hadn't snipped. Not yet. After Lana vanished, I wasn't sleeping. My cameras were on, alarms synced, phone charged at all times. That's when I remembered something Lana once said, just in passing. This house was built with secrets. Mine still has one. Yours might too. It sounded like one of her cryptic quips until I went searching. I pulled down the original blueprints from county records and compared them with what I knew of my house. There was a 1.5-foot void between my garage and office wall. No pipes, no structural reason, just empty space. So I started tapping. Eventually, I found it a hollow echo in the drywall. I cut into it carefully. Behind the wall, a sealed crawl space. Inside it, a single red crate of VHS camcorder and a safe. The safe was old, rusted, but the code was taped underneath the camcorder. Inside were paper copies of financial records going back 2 decades, but not just mine. These were from every HOA house in the neighborhood. Fees paid, fines issued. But here's the kicker. Some addresses had paid $0 for years, yet received premium amenities and upgrades. Those homes all belonged to board members. Karen, Harold, even the ex-president who moved in 2016, still had bills listed under their name. They were never paying, just feeding off everyone else. And worse, Vexley's name was on every payment log, listed as advisor fees, $2,500 a month, from every HOA account. For nothing. This wasn't mismanagement. It was theft, on a massive scale. The next morning, I planned to meet Jen to copy the files. But I never made it to her place, because when I opened my door, my mailbox was gone. Again. Only this time, they didn't just knock it down. They dug up the entire post, cement and all, and replaced it with a box wrapped in caution tape. Inside was a single envelope. No return address. I opened it, and instantly my throat tightened. It was a photo of me from the night before, standing in the crawl space, holding the documents, written across the top in red Sharpie. Next time, we seal the room with you in it. I looked up. The street was quiet, but somewhere they were watching. They knew I had everything. And now was my move. If you've been hooked by this wild ride of HOA corruption, secrets, and mailbox warfare, there's a lot more where this came from. Smash that like button, subscribe to HOA Nightmares, and turn on the bell so you never miss what happens next. Because this story, it's far from over. See you in the next nightmare.